Hello, welcome back. I'm Darcy Darkness, and this is Confessions from the Darkside, 13 Nights of Slaughter. I'll do a small disclaimer. Not entirely sure about what words or vernacular or derogatory terms or things like that are in this book. So I apologise in advance if there is any words that may not fit in with how we use them today. If they are offensive, I'm really sorry, and I will try my best to miss as many of them out. Are we ready? Are we sitting comfortably? Now we've got the disclaimer out the way, we can read the next story in our series. It's called Dead Man's Face, and it was published in 1884. Imaginative beings who invent marvellous tales may take what license they please, but a simple narrator is nothing if not accurate. So, before beginning this, I looked up old correspondences and various memoranda made at the time when the following things occurred. The first paper upon which I put my hand was a letter. I may as well open with a copy of it. Dear old boy, I have met her at last, my fate, the one woman in the world for me. Nothing is settled as yet, but I should not write unless hope we are certain. You must wish me joy, although she is a widow and an American. Two qualifications which I know you will find fault with. No matter, when you see, you will recant and be envious. Yours ever, Claude Morton. The writer was my brother. I was going to say my only brother, but I have another one. Although, the less said about him the better. Nearly every family has a black sheep, and there is no issues about being a black sheep, by the way. When he died some years ago, I passed a sponge over his long list of delinquencies and tried to think of him as kindly as possible. He died a disgraced man far away from home. I call this black sheep Stephen, my brother, not Claude's. The fact being that Claude can scarcely be said to have known him, I stood in age midway between the two. Claude was 16 years younger than Stephen, so that when the latter was shipped off as an irreclaimable, the former was a little golden-haired fellow of 7. The above letter made me feel both glad and sorry. I was glad that the boy, he was still the boy to me, although his age was 7 and 20, was going to be married, but I was sorry that his choice had not fallen on one of his own countrywomen and one who could have given him her first love. Still, all was peculiar, his own peculiar business. No doubt he had made a suitable choice, and the only thing left for me to do was to write him a cheerful letter of congratulations and hope that his love affair would soon be happily settled. A week went by, then came a long letter he proposed in orthodox form and had duly accepted. His letter lies before me at this moment, and I feel as I read it again, the 2 pages covered with the lover's usual raptures. I'm not a mercenary man, but I own I felt somewhat disappointed on learning that she was poor. Someone associates wealth with an American widow who is sojourning in England. But so far as I could gather from Claude's letter, Mrs. Depard, or Judith as he called her, was not well off. He spoke of her being all alone in London, which fact, he added, would necessarily hasten the marriage. It would take place, he hoped, in a week or two. In conclusion, he pressed me to run up to town to make their acquaintance of my future sister-in-law. I was very busy at the time, I may say in passing. That's my business, is to cure people's ailments, not to tell stories. Nevertheless, managed to pay a flying visit into town, and was duly presented with Claude's betrothed. Yes, she was handsome, strikingly handsome. Her whole appearance was much out of the common. She was tall, superbly built, on a large scale, perhaps, yet graceful as a panther in every movement. Her face gave evidence of much character, power, and determination, and of passion also, I decided. Her rich, dark beauty was at the time in full bloom, and although I saw at a glance that she was some years older than my brother, I was not all inclined to blame Claude for his rapturous expression. So far as personal charms went, I could find no fault with Judith Depard. and I could find no fault with Judith Despard. For the rest, it was easy to say that she passionately had love with Claude, and for the sake of this I gladly overlooked all my fanciful objections to his choice, congratulated him heartedly on having one so beautiful a creature. Yet, strange to say, in the midst of the newfound happiness, my brother seemed anything but the usual cheerful self. He was the merriest and most talkative of men, seemed taciturn, moody and preoccupied. The curious thing was that he had changed manner struck me particularly when we were in Despard's company. He spoke and behaved in the most affectionate and lover-like way, but there was in general bearing something which puzzled me altogether. It seemed to me that he might perhaps be nervous as to what impression his fair friend might make upon the elder brother whom he so reverenced and respected. This theory of mine was strengthened by the fact that when at night we found ourselves alone and I was able to freely express my admiration of Mrs. Despard's good looks, he brightened up considerably, and we sat until a very late hour and talked about the past, the present, and the future. "When do you mean to be married?" I asked. "In a fortnight or 3 weeks. There is nothing to wait for. Judith is living alone in lodgings. She has no friends to consult, so we shall just walk to the church some morning and get it over." "Well, let me walk with you. I should like to see the last of you." "All right, old fellow. But you'll be the only one unless Mary likes to honour us." Mary was my wife, but as her time was just then fully occupied by a very young baby, I did not think it was likely she would be able to make the long journey to town. "I shall fix the earliest day I can," asked Claude. "The fact is, I have been feeling rather queer lately. I shall fix the earliest day I can," asked Claude. "Feeling rather strange lately. I want a change." Thereupon I questioned him as to what ailed him. So far I could ascertain all that was the matter was having worked too hard, and being a little below par. I prescribed a tonic, and quite agreed with him as to the benefit which he would derive from the change of air. When I reached home, my wife scolded me for my stupidity. It seems that it was my duty to have found out all about Mrs. Despard's accidents, connections, circumstances, habits, disposition, etc. Whereas all I could say was that she was a beautiful widow with a small income, and that she and Claude were devoted to each other. "Yes," she said scornfully. "Like all other men, the moment you see a pretty face you inquire no further." I quite tremble for Claude. When I reflected how little I knew about Mrs. Despard, I felt abashed and guilty. However, Claude was a fully grown man, and no fraternal counsel was likely to turn him aside from his desire. In course of the next few days, he wrote me that he was about to be married on the 5th of the month. I made arrangements which would enable me to go to the wedding, but 3 days before the date named I heard again from him. The wedding was postponed for a fortnight. He gave no reason for the delay, but he said he was anxious to see me, and tomorrow he would run down to my home. He came as promised, and I was aghast when I saw him. He looked worn, haggard, wretched. My first thoughts was the business had gone wrong with him. His looks might well be of a man on the brink of ruin. After the first greeting, I at once took him to my study in order to be put out of suspense. Just as I would begin my anxious question, he turned to me. "Frank, old fellow," he said, imploring, and with a faint attempt to a smile, "don't laugh at me." "Laugh? That was the last thing I was likely to do." I pressed hands in silence. "You won't believe me." "I know," he continued. "I can't believe it myself, Frank. I am haunted." "Haunted?" I am bound to smile, not from any disposition towards merriment, but in order to show the poor boy the absurdity of his idea. "Yes, haunted. The word sounds ridiculous, but I can use no other. Haunted. What haunts you?" He came close to me and grasped my arm, and his voice sank to a hoarse whisper. "A horrible, ghastly, gruesome thing. It's killing me. It comes between me and my happiness, and I fought and struggled against this phantom terror. I have reasoned calmly with myself. I have laughed my own folly to scorn. In vain it goes, but comes again. Overwork, I said. Insomnia, too many cigars, late hours, and you being a drinker, man, I should add. Too much stimulant, too little food, anxiety, perhaps. Have you anything on your mind, any special worry? Of course I have, he said pettishly. Did I not tell you it's killing me? What is killing you? He rose and he paced the room excitedly, then suddenly he stopped short and once more clutched my arm. A face, he said wildly, a man's face, a fearful white face that comes to me, a horrible mask with features drawn as in agony, ghastly pale, hideous death or approaching death, violent death, written in every line, every feature distorted, eyes starting from the head, every cord in the throat standing out, strained as by mortal struggle, long dark hair lying flat and wet, thin lips moving and working, lips that are cursing, although I hear no sound. Why should this come to me? Why to me? Who is this dead man? Who face wrecks my life? Frank, my brother, if this is a disease or madness, cure me. If not, let me die. His words and gestures sent a cold thrill through me. He was worse, far worse than I had feared. Lord, I said, you are talking nonsense. Cure you? Of course I mean to cure you. Now sit down, collect yourself, and I will tell you. And tell me how this hallucination comes. Comes? How does it come? It gathers in corners of the room, it forms and takes shape, it glares at me out the wall, it looks at me from the floor, ever the same fearful, white dying face, threatening, cursing, sometimes mocking. Why does it come? I had already told the poor fellow why it came, but it was no use repeating it, my words. Tell me what you see tell me when you see it, I asked. At night, in darkness. He hesitated and seemed troubled. No, never at night. In broad daylight, only that to me is the crowning fear, the ghastliness of it. At night I could call it a dream. Frank, believe me, I am no weak fool. For weeks I have borne with this, and at last it has conquered me. Send it away, or I shall go mad. I'll send it away, old boy, never fear. Tell me, can you see it now? No, thank God, not now. Have you seen it today? No, today. No, I've been free from it. Well, you'll be free from it tomorrow and the next day and the next. It will be gone forever before you leave me. Now come and see Mary and the babies. I haven't asked you how Mrs. Desperate is. A curious look crossed his face. I think she grows more beautiful every day, he said. Then he seized my hand. Oh, Frank, he exclaimed. Rid me of this horror and I shall be the happiest man in the world. All right, I answered, perhaps with more confidence than I felt. Although I made the light of it to my patient, his state greatly alarmed me. I hastened to put him under the strictest and most approved treatment. I enforced the most rigid sumptuary laws, made him live on plain food, and docked his consumption of tobacco unmercifully. In a few days I was delighted to find that the diagnosis case was correct. Claude was rapidly recovering. In a week's time he seemed restored to health. The days went by and yet Claude had said nothing about leaving me. Yet unless the date was once more adjourned, he was to be married on the 19th. I did not counsel him to postpone the happy day. He was by now so well that I thought he could not do better than adhere to his arrangement. A month's holiday spent in the society of the women he loved, would, I felt certain, complete his cure and banish forever that grisly intruder begotten of disorganized nerves. From the monstrous regularity and the voluminous nature of their correspondence, it was evident delay and separation, notwithstanding that matters were going on quite smoothly between Claude and Judith Despard. Every day he received a long letter. Nevertheless, it was not until the 16th of the month that I knew exactly what he meant to do about his marriage. Frank, he said, have you ever been wonderfully kind? You have been wonderfully kind to me. I believe you have saved my life, for at least my reason. Will you do something more for me? Even unto half my kingdom, I answered. I am ashamed of the feeling, but I am absolutely dreading returning to town. At any rate, I wish to stay there no longer than is needful. Thursday morning I must, of course, be there to be married. You think I'm cured, Frank? He added abruptly. Honestly, yes. If you take care of yourself, you'll be troubled no more. Yet, why do you dread London so? Well, never mind. I will go up by the night mail on Wednesday. Then I need only be there for a few hours. Will you do this for me? Go up on Wednesday morning, see Judith, and explain how it is that I shall not see her until we meet in the church. Certainly, if you wish it, but you had better write as well. Yes, I shall do that. There are several other little things you must see to for me the license I have, but you must let the clergyman know. You had better go and see my partners. They may think it strange if I marry and go away without a word, thinking it better than he should have his own way. I promised to do as he wished. Upon my arrival in town on Wednesday afternoon, I went straight to Mrs. Despard's. I was not sorry to have this opportunity of seeing her alone. I wished to urge upon her necessity of being careful that Claude did not again get into the highly wrought nervous state from which my treatment had so happily extricated him. She was not looking so well as when last I saw her. At times her manner was restless, and she seemed striving to suppress agitation. She made no adverse comments on her lover's strange whim of reaching down tomorrow only in time for the ceremony. Her inquiries to his health were most happy, and when I told her that I no longer feared anything on his account, her heartfelt sigh of relief told me how deeply she loved him. Presently, she looked me full in the face. Her eyes were half closed, but I could see an anxious, eager look in them. He saw a face, she said. Has it left him? He told you of the strange hallucination then? No, but once or twice when sitting with me, he sprang to his feet and muttered, "Oh, that face, that ghastly, horrible face. I can bear it no longer," and then he rushed wildly from the room. What face did he see, Dr. Morton? To set her mind at rest, I gave her a little scientific discord which explained to her such mental phenomena were brought about. She listened attentively and seemed satisfied. Then I bade her adieu until tomorrow. The marriage was to be a quiet kind. I found that Mrs. Despard had made no arrangement for any friend to accompany her. Setting all the rules of etiquette at defiance, I suggested that although the bridegroom's brother, I should call for her in the morning and conduct her to the church. To this she readily consented. Somehow that evening I did not carry away such a pleasing impression of my brother's bride as I did when I first met her. I can give no reason for this, except I was not forgetful of my wife's accusation that when I first met Judith Despard I had been carried away by the glamour of her beauty, and thought of nothing else. As I walked to Claude's rooms, which I occupied for the night, I almost regretted that he had been so hasty. Certainly I wished that we knew more of his bride, but it was now too late for regrets or wishes. I called for Mrs. Despard at the appointed hour and found her quite ready to start. Her dress was plain and simple. I cannot describe it, but I saw that in spite of the excessive pallor, she looked very beautiful. In the carriage on our way to the church, she was very silent, answering my remarks with monosyllables. I left her in peace, supposing that at such moment every woman must be more or less agitated. When the carriage drew up at the church, the bride laid her hands upon my arm. I could feel that she was trembling. "Claude will be there?" she asked. "Nothing will stop him." "Nothing, but I may as well step out and see that he is waiting." Yes, Claude was in the church waiting for us, and we exchanged greeting. The old sexton summoned the curate when Judith Despard, my brother, and myself walked up to the altar rails. Claude looked very well that morning, a little tired perhaps, but the long night journey would account for that. He certainly looked proud and happy as he stood at the altar, side by side with the woman who in a few minutes would be his wife. But before the curate had finished reading the opening address, a great change came over him. From where I was standing I could see only his side face, but that was enough to show me that he was suffering from the agitation, something far above the nervousness so often displayed by bridegroom. A deadly pallor came over his face, small beads of perspiration sprang to his brow, and I noticed that those telltale mental disturbances, the hands were so tightly clenched that the knuckles grew white. It was evident that he was suffering anguish of some kind, and for a moment I thought of stopping the service, but the rite is but a short one, and for whatever cause Claude's agitation might proceed, it was perhaps better to trust him to curb it for a few months than to make a scene. Nevertheless, I watched him intently and anxiously. Then came the charge to declare any impediment. As a curate made the conventional pause, Claude, to my surprise, glanced round in a startled way, as it was fearing that his marriage would be at least at the last moment be forbidden. The look in his face was now one of actual terror. Both bride and bridegroom said their "I wills" in such low tones that I could scarcely hear their voices. Then, in pursuance of my duty, I gave the woman to the priest. He joined the hands of Claude and Judith. After having played my little part, I had not moved back to my former station. I was now close to the bride, and as Claude turned to her, could see his face to advantage. It was positively distorted and suppressed, emotion of some kind. His mouth was set, and I could see that his teeth were closed under his lip. He did not look at his fair bride. He gazed past over her shoulder. In fact, he seemed almost oblivious to her presence. I was dreadfully frightened. The clergyman's voice rang out. "I, Claude, take thee, Judith, to be my wedded wife." Then, hearing no echo of his words, he paused. "Repeat after me," he prompted. Again he began, "I, Claude," but his voice was drowned in a louder one, which ran through the empty church with a fierce cry, as inexpressibly rage. Claude had thrown the bride's hand from him and was pointing and gesticulating towards the wall upon which his eyes had been riveted. "Here, even here," he almost shrieked, "that cursed, white, wicked, dying face. Who is it? Why does it come between me and my love? Mad, mad, mad. I'm going mad." I needed not the clergyman's lack of dismay on the bride's cry of distress. I thought of nothing but my unfortunate brother here at the moment, which should be the happiest he had known, yet the gruesome hallucination had come back to him. I threw my arm around him and tried to calm him. "It is fancy, dear boy," I said. "In a moment it will be gone." "Gone? Why does it come? Why? What have I to do with this dying man? Look, Frank, look. Something tells me if you look you will see it. There, there, look there." His eyes were even fixed on the same point. He grasped on my arm convulsively. I am ashamed to say that I yielded and looked in the direction of his gaze. "There is nothing there," I said soothingly. "Look," he exclaimed, "it will come to you as to me." It may have been the hope of convincing Claude of the illusionary nature of the sight which tormented him. It may have been some strange fascination wrought by his words and manner which made me for some moments gaze with him. God of heaven! I saw gradually forming out of nothing, gathering on the blank wall in front of me, a face or resemblance of a face, white, ghastly, horrible, long, dark, wet-looking dark hair, eyes starting from their sockets, lips working, the whole appearance that of the face of a man who is struggling with death in every detail as Claude had described, and yet to me that face was more terrible than it ever could be to Claude. I felt my own frame trembling. I knew that in another moment I should be raving as wildly as he raved. Only his hoarse whisper recalled me to my senses. "You see?" he asked, or rather asserted. Horror forced the truth from me. "I see, or fancy I see." With a wild laugh, Claude broke from me. He rushed out the church and disappeared. As he left me, the face, thank heaven, faded from the wall or from my imagination. I turned to my companions. Judith Despard was lying in a dead swoon on the altar steps. The curate, with trembling hands, was loosening the throat of her dress. I called for water. The sexton brought it. I bathed the poor woman's temples, and in a few moments she sighed, opened her eyes, and then shuddered. I took her in my arms and staggered to the church door, and the curate removed his surplice and followed me. I placed my almost senseless burden in the carriage. "For heaven's sake, see her home," I said to the curate. "I must go and look after my brother. As soon as I had seen him, I will come round to Mrs. Despard's. Get her home quickly. The coachman knows where to go." They drove off. I threw myself into a cab and drove towards Claude's room. I hoped he might have gone straight there. To my great relief, when I reached his house, he was on the doorstep. We entered his room together. He sank wearily into a chair and buried his face in his hands. I was scarcely less agitated than himself, and my face, as I caught its reflection in the mirror, man was white as his own, waited for him to speak. Presently he raised his head. Go to her, he said. Ask her why that face comes between us. You saw it, even you. It can be no fancy of mine. Tell her we can move. We can meet no more. I will wait until you are calmer before I go. Calm, I am myself now. The thing has left me as it always does, Frank. I have hidden from you one peculiarity of my state. That awful face never shows itself to me unless I am in her company. Even at the altar it came between us. Go to her, ask her why it comes. I left, but I did not quit the house for some time. I went into an adjoining room and tried to collect my thoughts, for as I said, my mind was more troubled than even Claude's could be. I was ashamed to reassert it. I am willing to own that the excitement, my brother's impressive manner, superstition, which I did not know I possessed, anything that may bear a natural explanation, may have raised that vision. But why should that phantom gathering and growing from nothing until it attained to form, or at least a semblance, have been the face of one I had known? Why would the feature distorted in deadly agony have been those of my brother Stephen? For this was a dreadful face which Claude, prompting or my own imagination, had raised. Also, like one of my dreams, I went to do Claude's bidding. I was thankful, upon reaching Mrs. Despard's, to find that she had gone to her room and left word that she could see no one today. This gave me time to consider the position. Acting on a sudden impulse, I went to the telegraph office and sent instructions to my wife to forward to me by passenger train a small box in which I kept old letters and papers. Then I went back to Claude, and after some persuasion induced him to leave town at once. I told him I'd arrange everything on the morrow he was better away. In the morning the box arrived. In it I found what I wanted. After the calming effects of a night's rest, I felt ashamed of my weakness as I drew from old letters a photograph of my brother Stephen, one taken about 2 years before the report of his death reached us. Nevertheless, I put the portrait in my pocket and about noon went to Mrs. Despard's. I was at once admitted, and in a few minutes she came to me. She looked worn and haggard, as if sleep had not visited her for nights. Dark circles had formed around her fine eyes. Lines seemed to have deepened around her firm, passionate mouth. Whatever the fuck a passionate mouth is. Well done. She advanced eagerly towards me and held out her hand. I took it in silence. Indeed, I scarcely knew what to say or how to act. "Where is Claude?" she asked, in a quick voice, but scarcely above a whisper. "He has left town for a few days." She pressed her hand to her heart. "Does that mean I shall see him no more?" "I'm afraid I must say it does. He thinks it is better you should part." She gave a sharp cry and walked up and down the room, wringing her hand. Her lips moved rapidly, and I knew she was muttering many words, but in such a low key that I could not match their meaning. Suddenly she stopped and turned upon me fiercely. "Is this by your counsel and advice?" she demanded. "No, it is his own unbiased decision. Why? Tell me why. He loved me, I love him. Why does he leave me?" The passionate entreaty of her voice is indescribable. What could I say to her? Words struck in my throat. It seemed the height of absurdity for a sane man to give a sane woman the true reason for Chad's broken faith. Claude, not Chad. I stammered out something about his bad state of health. "If he is ill, I will nurse him," she cried. "I will wait for years if he will give me hope. Dr. Morton, I love Claude as I never before loved a man." She clasped her hands and looked imploringly into my face. In a mechanical way, I drew the portrait of my dead brother from my breast, and she saw the action. "His likeness," she cried joyfully. "He sends it to me, and he loves me." I handed her the photograph. "Mrs. Despard," I asked, "do you know?" I did not finish the question, yet it was fully answered. Never, I believe, save then did a human face undergo such a hidden, frightful change. The woman's very lips grew ashen. Her eyes glared into mine, and I saw them full of dread, and she staggered all but fell. "Why is it here? Who is it?" she asked out. I was a prey to the wildest excitement. To what revelation was this tending, and what awful thing I had to learn? "Listen," I said sternly. "Woman, it is for you to answer the question. It is the face of this man, his dying face, that comes between you and your lover. Tell me his name." I read rather than hear the words from dry lips formed. The name he once known by was Stanley. A quick, sharp shudder ran through her. For a moment I thought she was going faint. "He is dead," she said. "Why does he come between my love and me?" Others have loved or said they loved me since then. He saw no dead faces. Had I loved them, I might have married and been happy. Claude I love. Why does this dead man trouble him? That man, I replied, was my brother, Claude's brother. She threw out her arms with a gesture of utter despair. Your brother, Claude's brother, she repeated. Then she fixed her eyes on mine as if she read the secrets of my soul. You're lying, she said. I am not. He was our eldest brother. He left England years ago. He passed under a false name. He died. When and how did he die? She sank a dead weight into a chair, but still she looked at me like she was under a spell. I seized her wrist. Tell me, woman. Hate that, I cried. Tell me what this man was to you. Why his dying face comes to us. The truth. Speak the truth. She seemed to cower beneath my words, but her eyes were still on my face. Speak, I cried fiercely, and tightened the grasp upon her wrist. At last she found words. He was my husband. I killed him, she said in a strange voice, low yet perfectly distinct. I recoiled in horror. This woman, the widow and self-confessed murderess of one brother within an ace of being the wife of another. You murdered him, I said, turning to the woman. I murdered him. He made my life a hell on earth. He beat me, cursed me, ruined me. He was the foulest-hearted fiend that ever lived. I killed him. No remorse, no regrets in her words. Quite overcome, I leaned against the chimney-piece. Bad as I knew Stephen Morton to have been, I could at that moment only think of him as a happy, light-hearted schoolboy, my elder brother, and in those days a perfect hero in my eyes. No wonder my heart was full of vengeance. Yet even in the first flush of my rage I knew that I could do nothing. No human justice could be meted out of this woman. There was nothing to prove the truth of her self-accusation. She would escape scot-free. I could avenge his death, I said sullenly. She sprang to her feet, her dark eyes blazed. Avenge, she cried. It is not trebly avenged. Has he not taken all I care for in life from me? Has he not taken my love from my side? Coward in life, coward in death. When I killed him, I knew he would try and come back to me. He has tried for years. I was too strong for him. I could banish the face when he strove to haunt me. I could forget, I could love. I could have been happy. Yet he has conquered at last. Not me. He could not conquer me, but the one I love. Oh, the coward is avenged. In spite of my feeling of abhorrence, I gazed on the speaker in amazement. Her words were not those of one who had committed a black or dark crime, but one of who had suffered wrong. The strange, fanciful idea that the dead man had been trying to haunt her, but had been kept at bay by her strong will, was in my experience unprecedented. As I saw the agony of my mind under which she was labouring, the thought came to me, and that perhaps her words were true, that my brother's death was his this day. As I saw the agony of my mind under which she was labouring, the thought came to me that perhaps her words were true, that my brother's death was this day avenged. I resolved to leave. I could gain no good by prolonging the painful scene. She was still pacing the room in fierce passion. Suddenly she stopped short and in a thrilling accent began to speak. It seemed as if she had forgotten my presence. See, she cried, the river bank, the dark rushing stream. Ah, we are all alone, side by side, far away from everyone, fool. If you could read my heart, would you walk so near, so giddy, right? Do you think the memory of the old love will stay my hand when the chance comes? Old love is dead, you beat it, cursed it to death. How fast does the stream run? Can a strong man swim against it? Oh, if I could be sure that one push would end it all and give me freedom. Once I longed for love, your love, now I long for death. Your death, oh brave, swift tide, you are strong enough to free me forever. Hark, I can hear the roar of the rapids in the distance. There is a fall from the river cliff. There are rocks full. You stand at the very edge and look down. The moment is come. Ah! With her last exclamation, she used a violent gesture as if pushing something fiercely from her. I knew, in her excitement, reacting the tragedy. Free, 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 she cried, with a delirious, almost rapturous laugh, and clasped her hands. Hold him, brave stream, sweep him away. See, he swims, but he dare not swim with you. He, hurrying down the rapid, he must face you, and wrestle with you for his life. Bear him down, keep him from. If he masters you, he will land and kill me. Hold him fast, brave stream. Ha! His strength. fails. He is swept away, he is under. No, I see him again. He turns his face to me. He knows I did it. With his last breath, he is cursing me. His last breath, he is gone. Gone forever. I am free. The changes in her voice ranging from dread to tearful joy, her passionate words, her eloquent gestures, all these combined to bring the very scene before my eyes. I stood spellbound, and even as she described it, she seemed to see the unfortunate man battling for his dear life, and the rushing stream growing every moment weaker and weaker. As the woman's last wild exclamation, "Gone forever, I am free," rang through the room. I seemed to hear the cry of despair, drowned as the waves closed over the wretched man's head. I knew every detail of my brother's fate. I turned to leave the room. I longed to get away, and if possible to banish the events of the day from my mind. It was not given to me by Stephen Morton's avenger. My hand was on the door when the woman sprang to my side. She grasped my arm and drew me back into the room. "Look," she whispered. "Do you see it? There, the face. That awful face. It has come to me at last. The dead man was conquered. There, look, his eyes glaring, his mouth mocking. Now, it has once come. I shall see it always, always look." No, I was not doomed again to see or to fancy I saw that face. Its mission, so far as I was concerned, was at an end. But the look of concentrated horror which Judith Despard cast at the wall of the room beggars description. Then, with a piteous cry, she fell at my feet and seemed to strive to make me shield her from something she dreaded. I raised her. She broke from my grasp and again fell upon the floor, this time in paroxysms of madness. My tale is ended. That night she was removed to a private lunatic asylum, which is, again, a mental health facility, where for 3 years she was kept at my expense. She died raving mad, and from inquiries I made, I know that from the moment when it first appeared to her to the hour of her death, the face of the man she had killed was ever with Judith Despard. And that was the end of A Dead Man's Face. Have you heard that story before? Did you enjoy that story? What did you think? Have you been enjoying the Yule story time? Are you looking forward to the live one? Have Dead Man's Face. I am Darcy Darkness. This is 13 Nights of Slaughter, brought to you by Confessions from the Darkside. Let us know in the comments below if you enjoy these stories. Have you been enjoying this series? Let us know what your favourite one is. We love to hear what you think and how you're enjoying the 13 Nights of Slaughter and all the different stories from Victorian Britain. And we hope you're having an awesome festive period. And we will see you in the next story. And don't forget to catch us on social media at Instagram, Twitter, which is X, YouTube, and Spotify, Amazon Music, Pocket Cast, Podchaser. And if you just go into the Buzzsprout link, it will take you to all the different places where you can actually access our podcast, wherever you like to listen to podcasts, that is. And I'll see you in the next story. I'm Darcy Darkness. Later.